Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. And today, time for responsible change, which it has been for a while, and we hope will actually get realized at some point. But here to support responsible change, we have the honor of having a retired Hawaii State Judge, Sandra Simms, and noted author. We have mediator, arbitrator, and quarter of a decade insurance claim executive Rebekah Ratliff. She started at 12. That's why she looks so young now. We have the multi-honored, about to be Pepperdine Strauss Master's graduate, Tina Patterson, mediator, arbitrator, and winner of the Computer Assisted Learning Institute Award and a number of others. And then we have Bill Harrison, one of our top criminal defense and civil rights attorney, and me, the loyal followers of these nominees for 2021 Women of the Year. See, Melissa didn't let me put that on, but I snuck it in anyway. Okay, so for today, in another one of these uneventful weeks where there just seems to be virtually nothing happening on the national or the social justice or the political scene, any particular choices? Bill, you had started us off with a situation that caught your attention.
So instead of having me start off, since I did that in the past, okay, yes, let's talk about that. I was a little shocked to read today, and this apparently happened on April 28th, that apparently UH got a black eye because they entered a team in the university debates, the national debates, and apparently there was some racist remarks and epithets being thrown around during the course of the debate. And I believe it was Spelman, Clemson, Vanderbilt, and another Morehouse, yes. They walked out of the debates and would not continue until they would have some kind of understanding as to what the rules were, and also that the parties that were involved be chastised. And apparently that didn't happen. So as I said, Hawaii got a black eye, and I'm real concerned about that. And that just shows that racism touches upon everybody everywhere. And unfortunately, we do have a great melting pot, and we have a great paradise, but we're not immune from the racial issues as well that's blanketing the country or the world for that matter. So I think that'd be a great topic to jump into and talk about today.
And Bill, we want to thank you for that, because anyone who's under the illusion that people who have even high-level educational degrees are not manifesting truly offensive, harmful, dangerous racism is not paying attention. In fact, some of the worst of it is coming from exactly those sources. And one of the people that we mentioned in our pre-show conversation a little earlier, Senator Liz Cheney, is experiencing that. What aspects of the abuse being placed on her to you show characteristic patterns of systemic bias of any kind, gender, race, ethnic, anything?
I find that people who actually speak out in situations where they believe that the wrong is going on, no matter what color, no matter what gender, they're being attacked. And that's really a symptom in our country. And this is an individual that's part of their party speaking out for democracy and justice, and she's being attacked. And that to me is scary. Our democracy has already been under attack. And now we have individuals that represent, segments of our population who just basically want honesty and integrity in our political process, and that person's being attacked. So to me, that really is symptomatic of what's going on in our country and what we have to address.
And
And
there's the
we,
issue of exposure too. I think what is really we're also seeing is sort of this underlying racism, sexism, just sort of being brought to the fore in a way that we've not necessarily seen it in the past. And actually, it's actually a good thing in a way. It's unfortunate that people are being attacked or that these views are being held, but we need to know what we're up against in terms of where we go from here. And I know with regard, I don't know for sure, but I know I've read with regard to the incident involving the team that was alleged to be a part of UH, alleging the racist attacks on particularly historically Black colleges who were participants in the debate, was initially said to not be aligned with the university. Well, that's still not enough. You were there in a capacity in which you were allowed to represent the university, and we need to know more about what's happening with that. And I think we need to, as Bill mentioned, certainly call that out and get to the bottom of that. As far as the situation with Liz Cheney, we are seeing this sort of denigration of truth affecting our political democracy. It's very sad to see. I mean, I'm not a constituent of hers, but I certainly respect her perspectives and points of view. We can certainly disagree, but that doesn't mean that she must be attacked in such a personal way. That's unfortunately the way we've sort of denigrated to in light of the prior administration's way of addressing people who disagree with personal attacks. And it's just unfortunate. It's just unfortunate.
so is there a connection between the big lies, the racism, the personal attacks? What brings
So
those together, Rebecca?
yeah, I think so. And even Liz Cheney in her comments on one of the news stations addressed that. She was saying that this is all of what we're seeing in politics now is a result of the big lie and the refusal of people in Congress to address it and to stand up for truth. And we have news recordings of certain comments that people in Congress made, and now they've completely flipped as if they didn't say, call out what happened January 6th, for example. That was undeniable. We saw what happened. Some things you see, but then the narrative gets changed, and we're supposed to not believe our eyes. And so I do think there's a connection. It's just very sad. It's very concerning for those of us who have young adult children who are going
Yeah,
to have to navigate. Isn't that concerning, Sandra?
I think so, absolutely, because as parents and as just community members, what you're wanting to convey, to our young people is a sense of there's some integrity, there's some purpose, there's some way in which we participate in our society, and we do so in an honest and and in that kind of way. And when they see this, it becomes very difficult to provide the lessons that we really want to share with them and how to effectively participate in our society. I'm I'm getting a little there's a part of me that's getting a little bit frightened of what's happening, but at the same time, uh, I want to remain hopeful. I'm not thinking that I want to believe that people are of integrity when they're going into in public fields and expressing themselves. But some days I wonder. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think underlying this, and each of you has mentioned this word, is integrity and our personal integrity, but our integrity as a collective is really what's at stake right now. The rule of law, what we are seeing based on the events that we saw in January, as well as our personal integrity in terms of speaking up and speaking out. And I'm not a parent. I have godchildren and I worry about them going out the door in the morning and whether they'll make it back home safely. But it's this conflict between integrity and facts. And part of it is the misinformation, the falsehoods, the lies that incite people to take actions that a prudent person probably wouldn't take. And I think, Chuck, this goes back to what you were saying about some of the actions that we're seeing taken. They're being taken because people have been given falsehoods. I could use another word, but I'll just say falsehoods. And how they stretched them or decided to unpack them or twist them. We see this not just with rule of law. We see this even with our public health right now. People wanting to get vaccinated and others being told there's a conspiracy to kill Democrats or there's a conspiracy to kill Republicans. I mean, just stuff that you think is foolishness, but there's someone that's spinning this. I think about the old children's story, Rumpelstiltskin, weaving a story, and it becomes so fantastic that you just say that's just not possible. And the person is still shaking their head vigorously. Yes, it is. This is what's happening. We see this playing out. I thought about Facebook saying that a certain individual was still banned from using their social media. Is that really the message that you want to send? Or just say indefinitely for the foreseeable future, you are banned? And again, it goes back to being integrity, um, you know, stating where you really stand on things. And Sandra, I hear you. It is exhausting. I think it's at times it can be downright wearisome, but we can't give up. Um, I've been thinking a lot, and I know I've mentioned this in other episodes, how democracies die, and we're seeing the little checkbox where we have people who you're doing things like, this can't possibly, this could never happen in the real world, and it is.
An
Have we
important point.
ever seen it degenerate to this level of dangerously, violently personal attacks?
I think we've seen it in other countries. We've seen it historically. And when we talk about those other countries, and I'm thinking about Germany and I'm thinking about Italy, um, early Russia, we are stunned and we say, oh my gosh, that could never happen here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's happening.
Exactly.
Brought out an important word, misinformation. So as we were, listening through January and all of the conversations around the election, they were using the words misinformation and disinformation. And to be honest, I had never heard the word disinformation. So I looked it up. And of course, misinformation is giving wrong information, but disinformation is giving wrong information on purpose. And that's what we're seeing. This is the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my lifetime.
Wow.
And we have polls showing 70% of Republicans still claim that Biden didn't win the election. And we have Trump, as of yesterday, reasserting that same claim that Biden's not a legitimate president and needs to be removed, and finishing with the phrase, don't give up.
Yeah.
We'll never give up. And Mitch McConnell saying today, my one mission is to stop this administration.
These are frightening things to hear when you talk about, and they put them in a context of, this is what Republicans think. But I ask another question. When we're talking about these kinds of polls, and I saw that poll and it kind of hit me, it's like 70-something% of Republicans, but it's like, well, who are these Republicans in the first place that we're talking about? And I think enough of us know people who identify Republican who are not in that category. I think that this is just my personal view, and I don't have anything to necessarily back it up. But my concern is that so-called pool of Republicans, people who are identifying in that way, is dwindling. And so, what percentage of the population is actually identifying as Republican in the first place? It's not terribly high. And when you're looking at the demographics of, how you determine who's identifying as such, we're kind of down to, people who respond to, um, phone polls and participate in that sort of thing. And that demographic, unfortunately, is a small group in comparison to the total population. Um, most folks on cell phones and certainly younger people are not going to be the ones that respond to those kind of posts. I'm thinking the whole notion of how we're doing polling in the traditional sense may be changing as well, simply because the tools that are used to do that are just not as effective as they may have been another time. So I'm like, it's 70% Republicans. What are we talking about? Who are they? Um,
Yeah, following along those lines, what's really scary here is this. The fact that I think and this is just my personal opinion, but I think there's a group of Republicans out there that really don't support this effort. But however, they're being quiet about it because of the fact that they are Republicans. And I think that goes back to what Tina, everyone's saying here about integrity. It's like, attacks on Asian Americans. We have to speak out. And if you're a Republican and you do not believe that what's going on is proper and you are in the Cheney camp, we need to speak out. You need to change the referendum there. You need to make sure that people understand where you're coming from and that, in fact, there can be a two-party system here that believes in true democracy and not follow along the lines of our former president. So I think that's a problem for me. I think that there are Republicans out there, and I know some Republicans
I
who
do too. I do
don't,
too. And it's like, wait a
they
minute,
don't
that's
agree
not
with this,
you.
right?
That's not
Yeah,
you.
but they have to speak out.
Yeah.
So we got a great question from a viewer. And now just, why do you folks think that the Republican Party is not doing more to establish and present integrity?
Well, I think that, as I was getting to, I think that there's a fear here. What happened to Cheney may, in fact, happen to them amongst friends. And they, obviously they're in a privileged position. They have certain entitlements, and they don't want to be ostracized and put out of that special circle that they're in. That is a privilege and entitlement. And I think that's really what a lot of people are dealing with. And I may be wrong, and hopefully I'm wrong, but that thought scares me, that's the reason why they're just hanging on and not speaking up.
So Sandra,
Okay.
you
Go ahead.
talked about looking for grounds for hope. And Tina, by inference, and Rebecca, you as well. What if we look at the contrast? We know that in the 2016 campaign, and again, early in the 2020 campaign, there were strong divisions between moderate and progressive sectors of the Democratic Party. But look at what's been done with that. Look at what the leaders of those sectors have done to coalesce and cooperate in supporting the platforms that are being presented now for rebuilding America, for rebuilding families, for reestablishing a,
Mhm.
a middle class, ground up society that has been under violent assault for a lot more than 4 years. And we have the contrast also of the Gore Bush election. If ever there were reason to contest the legitimacy of an election,
It was that.
where the deciding vote in the Supreme Court was cast by a guy whose son was directly participant in the campaign efforts of one of the parties.
Yeah, that was. Oh my goodness,
And
I
here
still
we
shudder
are
at that. I still shudder
with
when I think about it.
exactly the same electoral result in 2020 as happened in 2016, but reversed as to candidates and parties, and with a much greater popular vote margin for the winner. And so, actually, for the first time in a while, we've had a substantial electoral and popular majority winner in the elections in the close states, the contested states, where there have been multiple recounts, including personal and signature recounts,
Mhm.
verifying those results. And yet, the attack on truth continues. And the other contrast with the Republicans, it's right out there in public.
Yeah. I think what Bill alluded to is correct. It's this whole notion of there's this fear of losing power. I mean, that's the real thing is you're in this privileged place, you're in this place of power, and all of a sudden you realize that the key to holding it is to align yourself with this, as she calls it, the big lie. And what you're when you do that, you're just assuring yourself that you'll be in alignment with Trump. But at the same time, you are seeing now, Republicans coming forward to say, it's going to cost me. I mean, you look at the representative in Illinois, he's probably
Kinzinger.
not going to make it.
Yeah, Kinzinger.
He's probably not going to get reelected. He knows that. And we've seen other Republicans take that stand. I'm not going to get reelected because I'm going to stand for this integrity and this truth that I know to be. Now, what happens after that? What do those folks do? I mean, they may not be in Congress, but they're certainly still going to be able to take some effective stands and do some effective work in their communities and the places where they live. So when I say I'm looking at hope, it's like maybe it isn't. Congress has some important things to do, but maybe we ought not spend all of our energy wondering on what a Republican person in Congress who's struggling to hang on to power is going to say or do. That may not matter. What's happening in our communities, what's happening in our families, what's happening in the places that we have aligned ourselves, what's happening in the organizations that we are a part of, the ones that are, working to affect change. What are we doing there? And maybe that's where it goes. I don't know.
And the question that presents is, have we ever seen a time in which the combination of the lies, the dirty tricks, the gerrymandering, the voter suppression laws, the attacks on their own independent leaders like Senator Cheney, Senator Romney, and others, have we ever seen a time when those combinations of factors have been this pervasive, this intense, and this violently destructive?
I don't
Not,
know.
not that I can remember.
Not that I can remember, but they are empowered by the former president.
Not in my lifetime. This reminds me of early 20th century with the beginning
Yeah.
of muckraking.
Yeah,
And
it's kind of like that. Yeah.
it's along those lines. But I think, Chuck, the other piece I was going to mention, which is the argument underlying where we're seeing with some of these elected officials, whether it's at the federal level or local, is truth. Whose truth? And truth is constantly being challenged with facts. And is what you're saying true, or is it factual, or is there a middle place? And I hear this as an argument. Well, he's telling the truth, but is it fact?
So, in
I
truth
don't
and
know if there's an
fact,
answer.
no, it's a great question, because one of my old mentors, the late John Jabinski, wonderful guy,
Oh yeah.
he said, Chuck, there is no truth, there's only perception. But if we look at perception, a huge majority of Americans support both the infrastructure plan to rebuild and
Yes.
the family plan to rebuild.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They absolutely support.
The
And
people that are fighting for the big lie and the stop the administration represent a tiny fraction of American population and voters. We have minority obstruction and, in effect, minority standstill rule at a level we may never have seen in our lifetime. What needs to
It
happen
takes a few.
to
It only
change?
takes a few.
what needs to happen? What needs to happen it's going to happen. We're seeing elections. I think even though we are having all these, election suppression and voter suppression laws in place, they're being done at a time when the electorate is far more sophisticated than it was when those kinds of tactics were initially imposed. And those are the ones that require the imposition of the Voting Rights Act of 1964 in the first place. So we certainly have a far more sophisticated electorate, at least among minority communities, than we did prior to that 1964 Act having to be enacted. And it is a persistent group that will not be denied. And I think you saw that. Certainly, Rebecca, you saw that in Georgia. I mean, it's just you're seeing that, and even with the notion of the redistricting that's coming into play. I mean, some of these states that were and areas that were so securely red because votes had been suppressed. That's just not going to continue. I mean, you're going to have these laws coming into place, and certainly they will be challenged. I certainly expect that, but I think you're seeing a different kind of electorate among minority communities. You're seeing it's not the same as the group that could have easily been suppressed. Um,
And in our last minute or so,
we're a minute already. We're done.
yeah, according to our resident boss, Melissa, yes. But if we look at what have been dominant power sectors and electoral sectors, the people and what they want this change because they know it's going to reach them, it's going to help them, it's going to touch them. And even as to the business sector, Trump's argument that he built the economy, we have a far stronger economy, lower joblessness, stronger even stock market. All sectors of the economy are moving in much healthier directions, and the vaccination rate is going to promote that continuing. So what are the opponents of this progress back toward reestablishing democracy left with?
Power grabs, pure power grabs. I don't know
Lies.
what else to say.
Status quo.
Yeah, you don't want to lose. You don't want to lose your power. McConnell doesn't want to. He doesn't want to lose the Senate, and there's a possibility that he could not be reelected. But can you imagine for him how important it is to hold on to that position?
So
Oh,
let's think
absolutely
about that
important.
question. And let's recognize that there's a lot more on the plate to take up 2 weeks from now. We've opened up a lot of questions, a lot of areas. Those of you who are watching this, those of you who do watch this later, please reflect on these. Think about it. Come back in 2 weeks and share your questions with us so that we can have more of an exchange with what matters to you. Sandra, Tina, Rebecca, Bill, thank you so much.